I'm Diana, 35 female. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in a house I bought with my own hard work. As a senior marketing director for a major tech firm, my life is a carefully curated ecosystem of deadlines, campaigns, and strategic planning. It's a demanding career, but it has afforded me a level of financial independence I never dreamed of as a child. This story, however, isn't about my professional success. It's about how I used that success to buy my father the gift of his dreams, only to have him turn it into a weapon against me in front of our entire family. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The idea started 6 months before my father's 60th birthday. Alfred, my dad, was a man carved from old-world ideals. He had spent 40 years as an engineer, a man who understood the world through blueprints, stress tolerances, and the unyielding laws of physics. He was practical, stoic, and emotionally distant. His love wasn't expressed in hugs or words of affirmation, but in ensuring the roof didn't leak and the car had a full tank of gas. Growing up, I craved a connection that felt just out of reach, a warmth I saw in other families but was absent in our own. His one true passion, the one thing that could bring a flicker of a smile to his stern face, was trucks. Specifically, the Ford F-150. For as long as I could remember, he'd talk about it. He'd point them out on the highway, comment on the engine size, and admire the towing capacity. He owned a beat-up, 20-year-old model that was more rust than paint, a vehicle he patched together with duct tape and sheer willpower. He called it old reliable, but we all knew it was one hard winter away from the scrapyard. He dreamed of a new one, a shiny, powerful machine with that new car smell and an engine that purred instead of coughed. But he was a man of thrift, a product of a generation that saved every penny and viewed luxury as a sin. He would never, ever buy one for himself. That's where I came in. For years, I had been methodically climbing the corporate ladder. The long hours and missed social events had paid off. I was financially secure, and the thought of giving my father this one, pure, unattainable joy became an obsession. It wasn't just about the truck. It was about finally breaking through his hard exterior. It was a grand gesture, a physical manifestation of my love and gratitude for the silent, practical support he had provided all my life. I imagined his face, the crack in his stoic facade, the genuine, unadulterated happiness. This gift, I believed, would be the bridge between us. The planning was meticulous. I spent weeks researching models, trims, and colors. I wanted it to be perfect. I finally settled on a top-of-the-line F-150 King Ranch Edition in a deep metallic burgundy, a color that felt distinguished just like him. It had all the bells and whistles, leather seats, a state-of-the-art sound system, and an engine that could probably tow our house. The price tag was staggering, more than my first down payment on my own home, but I didn't flinch. I signed the papers with a sense of triumphant finality. My younger brother, Arthur, was cautiously supportive. At 32, Arthur was a financial advisor who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. "Are you sure about this, Diana?" he'd asked over the phone. "That's a huge expense. Dad's never been one for big gifts." "That's the point," I argued. "He'd never do it for himself. That's what makes it special. It's not about the money, Arthur, it's about the gesture." "All right," he sighed, "but don't be disappointed if he just grunts and asks about the gas mileage." My stepmother, Amelia, was even less enthusiastic. She had been married to my father for 15 years, a quiet woman who had seamlessly adopted his frugal lifestyle. When I told her my plan, her response was a tight-lipped smile. "That's very generous of you, dear. I'm sure he'll be surprised." There was an odd note in her voice I couldn't quite place, a hint of something that wasn't quite approval. I brushed it off as her usual cautious nature. The only person who seemed to share my excitement was my Aunt Matilda, my dad's younger sister. She was a nurse, warm and empathetic, the emotional heart of our otherwise reserved family. "Oh, honey, that's the most wonderful thing I've ever heard," she said, her voice brimming with genuine warmth. "He's wanted one of those for 30 years. He'll be speechless." Her words were the validation I needed, a confirmation that my grand gesture would be received as intended. The day of the party, the truck was delivered to my house. I had arranged for a specialty transport service to keep it pristine. Seeing it parked in my driveway, gleaming under the afternoon sun, my heart swelled with pride. I tied a giant red bow to the grill, a slightly cheesy but necessary final touch. I had hired a driver to take it over to the restaurant where we were holding the party, with instructions to park it right out front, in the most visible spot. The plan was simple. We'd have dinner, and then I would lead him outside for the big reveal. The whole family was there, aunts, uncles, cousins. The air was filled with the low hum of polite conversation. My father sat at the head of the table, looking uncomfortable in the collared shirt Amelia had made him wear. He accepted the smaller gifts, a new watch from Arthur, a set of grilling tools from a cousin, with his customary stoicism. A nod here, a quiet thank you there. I watched him, my stomach fluttering with a mixture of nerves and excitement. I was saving the best for last. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. I felt like a child on Christmas morning, waiting for the one present I'd been dreaming of all year. In my mind, this gift wasn't just a truck, it was a key. A key to unlock the affection and approval I had always so desperately wanted from him. As the main course was cleared away and dessert menus were distributed, I knew it was time. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anticipation. I stood up, tapping my water glass with a spoon. A hush fell over the table as all eyes turned to me. "I'd like to say a few words for my dad on his 60th birthday," I began, my voice a little shakier than I intended. "Dad, you've always been a man of action, not words. You taught me the value of hard work, of reliability, and of fixing things yourself. You've never been one for fancy things, but I know there's always been one thing you've dreamed of having." I paused, letting the suspense build. My father looked at me, his expression unreadable, a blank slate of stoicism. Amelia was smiling that same, tight smile from before. Arthur gave me a small, encouraging nod. "So," I continued, pulling a small, elegantly wrapped box from my purse. "This is for you, but you have to come outside to see it." I handed him the box. Inside was the key fob, resting on a bed of black velvet. He opened it, staring at the Ford logo for a long moment. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. He didn't seem to understand. "Come on," I urged, my smile wide and genuine. "Let's go." I led the procession out of the restaurant's private dining room and into the cool evening air. The driver I'd hired had done a perfect job, parking the massive burgundy truck directly under a streetlight. It looked magnificent, the red bow a beacon of celebration. The metallic paint shimmered, and the sheer presence of the vehicle was breathtaking. A few cousins let out audible gasps. I walked my father to the driver's side door. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "It's yours." He stood there, staring at the truck. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. He walked a slow circle around it, running a hand almost hesitantly along the polished fender. He peered into the window at the pristine leather interior. I held my breath, waiting for the explosion of joy, the hug, the tearful thank you. I had played this moment over in my head 1,000 times, and in every version, this was where he finally, truly saw me. But the explosion never came. He finished his circuit and came to a stop in front of me. His face was still a mask, but there was something new in his eyes, a coldness that sent a shiver down my spine. He turned to face the assembled family, who were all watching with expectant smiles. He cleared his throat. And then, he raised the key fob into the air as if it were a champagne glass. "A toast," he said, his voice loud and clear, carrying across the quiet parking lot. He looked directly at me, a strange, cruel smirk playing on his lips. "To my idiot daughter, trying to buy love with money." The words hit me like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs. For a moment, I was sure I had misheard. The world seemed to slow down, the sounds of the city fading into a dull roar in my ears. But then, the laughter started. It wasn't everyone. Aunt Matilda looked horrified, her hand flying to her mouth. But Arthur chuckled, a short, nervous bark of a laugh. Amelia giggled, a high, thin sound that cut through the air like splintered glass. A few uncles and cousins joined in, their laughter a chorus of casual cruelty, as if my father had just told the funniest joke in the world. They were laughing at me, at my gift, at my pathetic, transparent attempt to connect with my own father. In that single, searing moment, the beautiful, expensive bridge I had tried to build between us didn't just collapse, it was nuked from orbit. The shame was a hot, suffocating wave washing over me. My face burned, and I felt a prickling behind my eyes, the threat of tears I refused to shed. My father was still looking at me, that smug, triumphant look on his face. He had taken my grand gesture, my heartfelt offering, and twisted it into a public humiliation. He hadn't just rejected the gift, he had rejected me, and he had done it in the most public and painful way possible. He had held my heart in his hands and crushed it for sport. I didn't say a word, there was nothing to say. Arguing would only make me look hysterical. Crying would give them the satisfaction of seeing my pain, so I did the only thing I could. I drew myself up to my full height, a sudden, icy calm descending over me. I looked at my father, then let my gaze sweep over the laughing faces of my family. I gave them a small, tight, unreadable smile. And then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked past the rows of cars, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the asphalt. I walked out of the parking lot and onto the sidewalk, hailing the first taxi that came by. As I climbed into the back seat, the driver asked, "Where to, miss?" I just gave him my address, my voice a hollow echo of itself. The laughter was still ringing in my ears, a soundtrack to the most profound humiliation of my life. I didn't know it yet, but that walk away wasn't an end. It was the beginning of a war. And as the taxi pulled away, leaving the gleaming truck and my jeering family behind, I made a silent promise to myself. The driveway would be empty in the morning, and they would finally learn what it felt like to be left with nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch in the dark, the silence of my house a stark contrast to the cacophony of my thoughts. The scene at the restaurant played on a loop in my head, the smug look on my father's face, the sound of my family's laughter, the crushing weight of public humiliation. Each replay was like turning a knife in an open wound. The hurt was a physical thing, a heavy ache in my chest that made it hard to breathe. But as the hours ticked by, something began to shift. The raw, bleeding pain slowly started to cool, hardening into something else. It was a cold, sharp, and intensely focused anger. The kind of anger that clarifies things, that burns away the fog of sentimentality and leaves behind only the hard, unvarnished truth. For my entire life, I had been the good daughter. I got straight A's, went to a good college, and built a successful career. I never asked for anything, never caused any trouble. I had spent decades chasing an illusion, the idea that if I was perfect enough, successful enough, generous enough, my father would finally give me the love and approval I craved. That toast, that single, cruel sentence, had shattered the illusion completely. He didn't see my success as a source of pride. He saw it as a threat, a tool I was using to buy love. He didn't see the gift as a gesture of affection. He saw it as an insult, a gaudy display of wealth from his idiot daughter. The laughter was the worst part. It wasn't just my father's cruelty, it was the casual complicity of the others. My brother Arthur, who knew how much this meant to me. My stepmother Amelia, whose quiet disapproval now seemed sinister in hindsight. They hadn't just witnessed my humiliation, they had participated in it. They had validated my father's assessment of me, joining in the mockery without a second thought. They were all on his side. And in that moment, I realized I was utterly alone. As the first hints of dawn began to streak the sky, my anger coalesced into a plan. It was simple, audacious, and deeply satisfying. He thought the truck was a tool to buy his love. Fine, I would take the tool back. The truck was legally mine. I had the title, the bill of sale, and the registration, all in my name, tucked away in my home office safe. I had planned to sign the title over to him after the party, a final flourish to the grand gesture. Thank God I hadn't. My first call was to a 24-hour towing company. I chose one from a neighboring city, ensuring they would have no connection to anyone my family might know. I explained the situation calmly and professionally. "I need a vehicle recovered," I said, my voice steady. "It's a brand new Ford F-150. It's parked in the driveway of a residence in Northwood. The vehicle is registered in my name, and I have the title in hand. I need it picked up and delivered to a secure storage facility." The dispatcher was all business. "Do you have the keys, ma'am?" "No," I replied. "I do not. It will need to be towed." "Not a problem. We can have a flatbed there within the hour. We'll need proof of ownership upon arrival." "I'll be there to meet them," I said. "Send me the address of the storage facility." My next call was to my Aunt Matilda. She was the only one who hadn't laughed. Her horrified expression was etched into my memory. Her phone rang several times before she picked up, her voice groggy with sleep. "Diana, honey, is that you? I'm so sorry about last night. I tried to call you." "It's fine, Aunt Matilda," I said, cutting her off. My voice was devoid of emotion. "I'm not calling for apologies. I need to know something. Have you ever heard my father say anything negative about my career or my income?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and hesitant. "Diana, your father, he's a proud man, from a different time. He doesn't always understand the world you live in." "That's not an answer," I said, my tone sharpening. "What has he said?" She sighed, a sound of weary resignation. "He's jealous, honey, and so is Amelia. They see your success, your beautiful house, your independence, and they resent it. Alfred feels like you're showing him up, like you've surpassed him. Amelia just fans the flames. She's always whispering in his ear about how you're forgetting where you came from." The confirmation was a cold knot in my stomach. It wasn't just a spontaneous, cruel joke. It was rooted in years of resentment. They saw my success not as something to be proud of, but as a personal affront. "Thank you, Aunt Matilda," I said. "That's all I needed to know." "What are you going to do?" she asked, a note of worry in her voice. "I'm just fixing a mistake," I replied and hung up. I dressed in simple, dark clothing, pulled my hair back, and grabbed the folder containing all the truck's legal documents. I met the tow truck driver on a quiet side street just a block away from my father's house. The driver was a burly man with a no-nonsense demeanor. I showed him the title and my driver's license. He grunted in satisfaction, and we proceeded to the house. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a pale, gray light over the sleeping neighborhood. And there it was, sitting in the driveway, looking completely out of place in front of my father's modest, tidy home. The giant red bow was still on the grill, a garish, mocking reminder of the previous night's disaster. It looked like a monument to my own foolishness. The driver was efficient and discreet. With practiced ease, he backed the flatbed up to the driveway, lowered the ramp, and began hooking the winch to the front axle of the F-150. The sound of the winch motor was a low, powerful hum in the morning quiet. I stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching as the truck was slowly, inexorably pulled onto the back of the flatbed. It was a surreal sight. This vehicle, which I had poured so much hope and money into, was now being repossessed. By me. From my own father. As the driver secured the truck to the bed, a light flicked on in my father's house. A curtain twitched in the front window. My heart leaped into my throat, but I held my ground. I had every legal right to be here. A moment later, the front door opened, and my father stood there in his bathrobe, his face a mask of disbelief. He stared at the tow truck, at the F-150 strapped to its back, and then his eyes found me, standing on the sidewalk. We locked eyes across the manicured lawn. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The confusion on his face slowly morphed into a dark, thunderous rage, but I felt nothing. No fear, no guilt, no regret, just a cold, clean sense of purpose. I gave him a slow, deliberate nod. Then I turned, got into my own car, and followed the tow truck as it pulled away from the curb, carrying the most expensive lesson I had ever learned. The driveway was empty, and the silence that followed was deafening. The phone started ringing before I even got back to my house. The first call was from my father. I watched his name flash on the screen, let it ring until it went to voicemail, and then blocked his number. The second call was from Amelia. I did the same. The third was Arthur. I hesitated for a moment, then blocked his number too. I wasn't ready to hear their feigned outrage, their accusations, their demands. I needed silence. I spent the rest of the morning in a flurry of administrative activity. I called the dealership and explained that I would be selling the truck back. Because it had less than 50 miles on it and was essentially still in showroom condition, they offered me a buyback price. It was a significant loss. Tens of thousands of dollars vanished in an instant, but I considered it the price of my own naivety. A stupid tax. I agreed without negotiation and arranged to have the title couriered to them once the funds cleared. The money was a sunk cost. Getting it out of my life was the real profit. By midday, the assault on my phone had escalated. A barrage of text messages began flooding in from numbers I hadn't blocked yet, cousins, uncles, family friends. They were all variations on the same theme. Diana, your father is devastated. How could you be so cruel? That was a horrible thing to do. He was just joking. You're an ungrateful child, after everything he's done for you. You need to bring the truck back and apologize. The narrative had been set, and I was the villain. In their version of the story, my father's public humiliation of me was a harmless jest, a bit of old-fashioned ribbing. My response, however, a calm, legal, and decisive action, was a malicious, unforgivable act of cruelty. The hypocrisy was staggering. They had laughed in my face, and now they were clutching their pearls in manufactured horror. The most venomous texts came from Arthur. I can't believe you. You've broken Dad's heart. You're tearing this family apart over a bad joke. You always have to be so dramatic, making everything about you. Grow up, Diana. Tearing the family apart? I thought with a bitter, humorless laugh. The family was already a fractured, dysfunctional mess held together by unspoken resentments and performative obligations. I hadn't torn it apart. I had simply held up a mirror to it. Late that afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I peeked through the peephole and saw my Aunt Matilda standing on my porch, her face etched with worry. I trusted her, but I was still wary of any contact with my family. I opened the door but left the security chain on. "Can I come in, Diana?" she asked softly. I hesitated, then slowly unlatched the chain and let her in. We sat in my living room, the air thick with unspoken words. "They're all losing their minds," she said, shaking her head. "Alfred is on a rampage, calling everyone he can think of to tell them what a monster you are. Amelia is playing the victim, weeping about how you've ruined his special day. It's a disgusting performance." "I expected as much," I said, my voice flat. "I came to tell you, this isn't new," she said, leaning forward. "This resentment, this jealousy, it's been building for years. I've heard the whispers at family gatherings. Amelia is the ringleader. She's always making little comments, planting seeds of doubt." She proceeded to recount a series of conversations she had overheard over the years. Amelia complaining to a cousin about how my fancy job had made me stuck up. My father telling his brother that my success was just luck and that I didn't understand the value of real work. Arthur telling Amelia that I was irresponsible with money and that my generosity was just a way to show off. It was a conspiracy of whispers, a slow, steady campaign of character assassination that had been happening right under my nose. They had been nurturing this narrative for years. Diana, the arrogant, flashy daughter who thought she was better than everyone else. My gift hadn't been an act of love. It had been the perfect piece of evidence to support the case they had already built against me. My father's toast wasn't a spontaneous cruelty. It was a verdict delivered to a jury that was already convinced of my guilt. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked, a fresh wave of hurt washing over me. Matilda looked down at her hands, her expression pained. "I didn't want to believe it was serious," she admitted. "I thought it was just petty jealousy that would pass. I tried to defend you, to tell them how proud they should be. But they don't want to be proud, Diana. Your light casts a shadow, and they'd rather curse the light than step out of the dark." Her words were a final, brutal confirmation. The family I had been trying so hard to please didn't just misunderstand me. They actively disliked the person I had become. My independence, my success, the very things I had worked so hard for, were the things they resented most. Arthur called me, Matilda continued. He wanted me to talk some sense into you. He said you were being irrational and emotional. He's the one who is a financial advisor, I said with a dark laugh. He should understand that taking back an asset that was legally mine is the most rational move I could have made. They're not angry because I was irrational. They're angry because I was not. I walked her to the door, feeling a strange sense of clarity. The pain was still there, a deep, resonant ache, but it was no longer confusing. It had a name and a face. It was the face of my father, twisted in a cruel smirk. It was the sound of my brother's complicit laughter. It was the whisper of my stepmother, poisoning the well of my family against me. "Be careful, Diana," Matilda said as she left. "They're not going to let this go." "I know," I replied. "But they seem to have forgotten who they're dealing with. I built my entire career on strategy and execution. They've just started a war with an expert." As I closed the door, I knew what I had to do next. This wasn't just about a truck anymore. This was about reclaiming my own narrative. They had spent years whispering lies about me. It was time for me to speak my truth, not with whispers, but with the cold, hard, and undeniable language of consequences. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in strategic silence. I did not answer LLS. I did not reply to texts. I did not engage with the flying monkeys they sent to deliver their messages of guilt and outrage. I erected a digital fortress around myself, and from within its walls, I began to dismantle the financial and emotional ties that had bound me to them for so long. My father and Amelia lived in the house I grew up in. After my mother passed away 10 years ago, the house was left to both my father and me with a 50-50 ownership stake. He had a lifetime right to live there, but I was still on the deed. When he married Amelia, I had never thought to change it. It was a relic of a past life, a legal tie I had largely forgotten about. I contacted a real estate lawyer. I explained the situation, leaving out the emotional drama and focusing only on the facts. I was a co-owner of a property and wished to be bought out of my share. The lawyer, a sharp, efficient woman named Ms. Davies, laid out my options. "You can force a partition sale," she explained. "That means a court orders the property to be sold, and the proceeds are split according to ownership. Given that he has a lifetime right to reside there, it can be complicated, but your co-ownership gives you significant leverage. The first step is to send a formal offer. We will have the property appraised, and you will offer to sell him your 50% share for its current market value. He will have a set period, say 90 days, to secure financing." The appraisal came back, and the value of the house was significantly higher than I had anticipated. My 50% share was a substantial six-figure sum. I knew, with absolute certainty, that my father and Amelia did not have that kind of money. They lived on his modest pension and Social Security. They had no savings to speak of, a fact Amelia often lamented in not-so-subtle digs about the cost of living. Ms. Davies drafted a formal, legally binding letter and sent it via certified mail. The letter was a work of art in its cold, corporate precision. It outlined my legal stake in the property, the appraised market value, and my offer to sell him my share. It gave him 90 days to respond with a formal offer to purchase, or the matter would proceed to a court-ordered sale. There was no emotion, no mention of trucks or birthdays. It was pure business. While I waited for the inevitable explosion from that letter, I turned my attention to my brother, Arthur. For years, I had kept a significant portion of my investment portfolio with the firm where he worked. It wasn't because he was the best financial advisor. It was a gesture of familial support. I had entrusted him with a substantial amount of my hard-earned money, assuming he would manage it with diligence and care. After his complicit laughter and venomous texts, that trust was shattered. I scheduled a meeting with the managing partner of his firm, a man I had met at a few company events. I did not schedule it through Arthur. I went through the partner's executive assistant. I walked into that meeting cool, calm, and prepared. "I am here to move my portfolio," I stated simply, after the initial pleasantries. "I will be transferring all my assets to a new firm, effective immediately." The partner was taken aback. My portfolio was one of the largest personal accounts managed by his branch. "May I ask why?" he asked, a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Has there been an issue with the service, with Arthur?" "Let's just say my financial goals have changed, and I no longer have confidence in my current advisor's ability to act in my best interest," I said, my voice even. "His recent personal conduct has led me to believe he is incapable of making sound, unbiased judgments regarding my assets. I've come to you directly out of professional courtesy to make this transition as smooth as possible. I trust you'll handle the paperwork discreetly." I didn't need to say more. The implication was clear. A client of my size pulling their assets was a major blow, and citing a lack of confidence in the advisor was a serious black mark on his professional record. The partner understood immediately. He was profusely apologetic and assured me the transfer would be handled with the utmost priority and discretion. Arthur would not find out until the transfer was already in progress, initiated by his own boss. It was a clean, professional severing of ties, one that would have real, tangible consequences for his career and his commission-based income. The final key was my own. It was a key to a safe deposit box that I shared with my father, a holdover from my college days. It contained my birth certificate, my social security card, and some family heirlooms my mother had left specifically to me in her will, her wedding ring, a pearl necklace, and a collection of old family photographs. I had always meant to move them, but life had gotten in the way. I went to the bank that afternoon. The process was simple. I signed the forms, emptied the contents of the box into my own bag, and surrendered my key. The box was now closed, my access revoked, but more importantly, so was his. He would not discover this for months, perhaps years, but when he did, he would find an empty metal box, another small, silent testament to the bridges I was burning. Each of these actions, the letter about the house, the transfer of my portfolio, the closing of the safe deposit box, felt like a release. I was taking back the keys. Not just the key to a truck, but the keys to my financial security, my property, and my personal history. These were the things that had been entangled with my family, used as leverage, and taken for granted. By reclaiming them, I wasn't just cutting ties. I was building a new fortress of independence, one where I held all the keys, and the locks were on my side of the door. The silence from their side was about to be broken by a storm, and I was ready for it. The certified letter from my lawyer landed like a bomb in my father's quiet, predictable life. The explosion came in the form of a voicemail from an unblocked number, one of my uncles, who had clearly been tasked as an emissary. His voice was a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Diana, what in God's name are you doing? Your father just received a letter from a lawyer. You're trying to kick him out of his own house, the house your mother wanted him to live in until the day he died. This is a new low, even for you. Your stunt with the truck was childish, but this is evil. You need to call this lawyer off and beg your father for forgiveness." I deleted the voicemail without a flicker of emotion. His own house was the key phrase. He had conveniently forgotten that it was my house, too. My mother had left it to both of us to ensure I would always have a stake in it, a piece of her legacy. She had known her husband well. Days later, the official response came, not from a lawyer, but in a handwritten letter from my father. It was a rambling, self-pitying tirade full of misspelled words and furious accusations. He called me a greedy, heartless vulture. He accused me of trying to make him and Amelia homeless. He claimed I was disrespecting my mother's memory. He ended the letter with a dramatic flourish. "You are no longer my daughter." There was no apology, no glimmer of self-awareness, no acknowledgement of the event that had triggered all of this. In his mind, he was the victim and I was the aggressor. The letter was meant to wound me, to shame me into backing down, but as I read it, I felt nothing but a profound sense of detachment. The man who wrote this letter was a stranger to me. The father I had once loved and tried so desperately to please had been an illusion. This angry, bitter man was the reality. I gave the letter to Ms. Davies. This is his R. Response, I said. She read it, her expression impassive. This is not a legal response. It's an emotional outburst. We will proceed as planned. The 90-day clock is ticking. Meanwhile, the news of my portfolio transfer had hit Arthur like a freight train. He didn't try to call me. Instead, he sent a single, desperate email to my work address. Subject, urgent, we need to talk. Diana, I just found out you moved your accounts. I can't believe you would do this without even talking to me. This is going to have a serious impact on my standing at the firm. It makes me look incompetent. Is this about the party? I said I was sorry. It was a joke that went too far. You can't torpedo my career over a joke. Please call me. We can fix this. I'll talk to Dad. I'll make him apologize. Just please don't do this. His apology was as hollow as his laughter had been. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry for the consequences he was now facing. He was willing to make Dad apologize, not because it was the right thing to do, but because he saw it as a transactional fix to get my money back. He saw my assets as his, my success as something he was entitled to a piece of. I typed out a short, simple reply. The decision is final. My financial security is my priority. I suggest you focus on your other clients. I hit send and archived the email. The conversation was over. The silence from their end became a heavy, oppressive thing. The 90 days stretched on. The family members who had been so quick to condemn me were now conspicuously quiet. They had been happy to join in the pylon when they thought I was just the emotional, irrational daughter. But now, faced with the cold, hard reality of lawyers and financial consequences, they had retreated into the shadows. No one wanted to be caught in the blast radius of a legal battle. It was during this time that Aunt Matilda became my lifeline. She called once a week just to check in. She never offered advice unless I asked for it, and she never tried to push for a reconciliation. She simply listened. "They're stewing," she told me one evening. "Alfred is trying to get a loan to buy you out, but no bank will touch him. He has no income and no collateral besides the house itself, which isn't enough. Amelia is in a constant state of panic. She thought she was set for life, and now she sees it all slipping away." "And Arthur?" I asked. She sighed. "He's putting on a brave face, but I heard from his wife that he lost a major bonus because of your portfolio withdrawal. They're having to rethink their plan to buy a bigger house. He's furious, but he's directing it all at you, of course. He refuses to see his own part in it." Their silence wasn't peace. It was the quiet of a cornered animal. They were trapped by the consequences of their own actions, unable to accept their role in creating the situation. They had expected me to absorb the blow, to cry, to get over it, and to come back into the fold, ready to be their emotional and financial punching bag once more. They had fundamentally miscalculated. They thought they were dealing with the child I had been, not the woman I had become. As the 90-day deadline approached, Ms. Davies received a call. It was from a lawyer my father had finally been forced to hire. Their opening offer was laughably low, a fraction of the appraised value. Ms. Davies rejected it instantly. The negotiations were short and brutal. My father's lawyer had no leverage, and he knew it. My case was ironclad. In the end, there was only one option. The house would have to be sold. The court order came through, a dry legal document that signified the end of an era. The house where I had grown up, where my mother had planted roses in the garden, where all my childhood memories resided, was going on the market. I expected to feel a pang of sadness, of loss. But as I signed the final documents, the only thing I felt was a profound sense of relief. I was finally, truly free. The weight of their expectations, their resentment, their silent, suffocating judgment was being lifted. Their silence had been a weapon they used to control me, to make me question my own reality. But now, my silence was my power. It was the sound of me closing a door on a life that was no longer mine, and turning to face a future that I would build on my own terms. The sale of the house was quicker than anyone expected. The market was hot, and a well-maintained home in a desirable neighborhood was snapped up in a matter of weeks. The closing day was a purely transactional affair. I didn't attend. Ms. Davies handled everything, and a few days later, a check for my 50% share, minus legal fees, was deposited into my account. It was a substantial sum, the final financial dividend from a lifetime of emotional bankruptcy. My father and Amelia had to move into a small, cramped apartment on the other side of town. It was all they could afford on his pension and their half of the sal. The grand stage for their quiet suburban life was gone, replaced by thin walls and a view of a parking lot. Arthur and his wife put their plans for a bigger house on indefinite hold. The loss of my account had been a significant blow to his reputation at the firm, and his income had taken a permanent hit. He was no longer the golden boy, the rising star. He was just another advisor, struggling to rebuild his client base. The rest of the family treated me like a ghost. At the few larger family events that Aunt Matilda convinced me to attend, like a cousin's wedding, they would avert their eyes, falling into hushed conversations if I came near. I was a pariah, the villain of a story they told themselves to avoid looking at their own reflections. I didn't mind. Their avoidance was a gift. It saved me the trouble of having to make small talk with people who had celebrated my deepest humiliation. My relationship with Aunt Matilda blossomed. Freed from the toxic dynamics of the larger family, we built our own, separate connection. We had dinner once a week. We talked about her work at the hospital, my latest marketing campaigns, books we were reading, and the funny, absurd things we saw in the world. She had known my mother better than anyone, and she shared stories about her that I had never heard, filling in the gaps of my memory with tales of my mother's strength, her humor, and her unwavering belief in me. "She would be so proud of you, Diana," Matilda said one evening, her eyes glistening. "Not just for your success, but for your strength, for standing up for yourself. She always wanted you to have a backbone of steel." It was in that moment that I realized the approval I had been seeking from my father had been the wrong goal all along. The love and validation I needed had been there, in my mother's memory, in my aunt's unwavering support, and most importantly, within myself. One Saturday morning, a few months after the house was sold, I was cleaning out my garage and came across a box of old photo albums. I sat on the dusty floor and began flipping through the pages. There I was, a gap-toothed kid, standing next to my father and his old, rusted truck. He was looking at the camera, a rare, small smile on his face. In that photo, he was my hero. I felt a brief, sharp pang of grief for the father I thought I had, the family I wished I'd been born into. But it was a clean grief, a mourning for an illusion, not a reality. I closed the album, put it back in the box, and sealed it with tape. It was a part of my history, but it no longer defined my present. The money from the house sale sat in a high-yield savings account untouched. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Then, one day, driving home from work, I saw a "For Lease" sign in the window of a small, charming storefront on a bustling main street. An idea, wild and unexpected, sparked in my mind. For years, I had a secret passion for baking, a creative outlet far removed from the data-driven world of marketing. The next day, I called the number on the sign. I spent weeks drafting a business plan, using all the marketing skills I had honed over the years. I used a portion of the house money for the down payment and to secure a small business loan. I called my new venture the Queen of Tarts, a name that made me smile every time I said it. 6 months later, I stood in my own bakery, the air filled with the scent of warm sugar, butter, and coffee. Aunt Matilda was there, beaming with pride, helping me arrange pastries in the display case. The bell above the door chimed, and our first customer walked in. I hadn't just taken back a truck. I had taken back my life. I had learned that true family isn't about blood. It's about respect, support, and unconditional love. I had discovered that my worth wasn't tied to anyone's approval but my own. My father had tried to humiliate me for trying to buy love, but he had taught me a far more valuable lesson. The only love worth having is the love you build for yourself. I looked around my beautiful bakery, at the life I had created from the ashes of my old one. I had started my own engine, and I was finally on a road of my own choosing, driving into a future that was entirely, completely, and wonderfully mine.